here in Nigeria, the federal government says it's left with no choice than to implement its no work, no pay policy on resident doctors for refusing to call off their strike. Egosa Igumbo has more.
For 2 weeks, resident doctors have been on strike, the third one this year alone. Negotiations over their 12-point demands appear to have failed, and neither side is willing to sheath their sword. The crisis in the medical sector is coming in the midst of a global pandemic and an outbreak of cholera in Nigeria.
We have been having long meetings with the young doctors to tell them that, look, we have a certain responsibility to our country. Every country who has difficult situation at this time should understand that the responsibility is for all of us. If you have any problem, any grudges, let's talk about it. If we can't solve it now, let's continue talking until we find solution, but don't drop work.
The federal government claims that most of their demands have been met. It's worried that a strike may hamper Nigeria's fight against COVID-19.
Your salary comes from taxpayers' money. So if it didn't work, why should you go and be saying you should be paid? Because if that is so, you can be encouraged to stay home for 6 months, and your salary is running from public funds, from taxpayers' money, and you have not given the community any service. So that no work, no pay is not just a government regulation. It's recommended, it's specifically stated in ILO regulations.
The rising number of the COVID-19 infection is disturbing, and the number of those already vaccinated is still a far cry from the 70% target of the government. Nigeria is in a race against time.
Yesterday, we recorded the highest number of single cases in a day in the third wave. We had higher numbers on the day in the second wave, but really, day to day, week to week, over the last few weeks, our cases are increasing.
The percentage of Nigerians that have been vaccinated so far is 2.3% of eligible Nigerians. We plan to vaccinate this population, about 112 million Nigerians, within a span of 2 years, starting from when we rolled out the vaccine. And this is still dependent on the availability of vaccines, right? So if, for example, we go through a long stretch without vaccines, right, that means we cannot be vaccinating, and you cannot count that as among the 2 years that we've provided.
To beat the 2022 target, Nigeria is speeding up its vaccination campaign after an initial delay.
With the arrival of the Moderna vaccine, we found out that the barcoding that is needed for the traceability was not full barcoding compared to the COVID shield that we got from India. India is a little bit more advanced in barcoding, labeling, and it has nothing to do with the quality. No, it is just ability to be able to track using barcoding how the vaccines move. So what we then had to do with the Moderna vaccine is to add another label to the packaging.
An additional 40 million single dose of the Johnson & Johnson vaccines are being purchased, apart from the first 29 million doses already paid for.
It was $10 when we first started, but the price came down, and then that means we get more than we had actually originally booked. So that we boost our vaccine stock, and that tells you clearly that majority of vaccines going to be used in Nigeria is procured by government. It's not just a gift.
Despite the rising cases, the Minister of Health rules out the possibility of another lockdown. But while efforts are being made to contain the spread, the government advises Nigerians to maintain public health measures. Egusa Higumbo, Arise News.
Well, no work, no pay threat is as old as the industrial action itself in this country. But I think I must add that this was we could have prevented the strike from happening in the first place.
You see, the Chinese will say the best time to do something is 20 years ago. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is now. We could have prevented the strike 20 years ago, even more than 20 years ago. When you look at year-on-year investment in health, it has dropped. We are not investing in health. The government is just playing kid. It's just playing chucky hopscotch with the healthcare sector. It's like child's play. And we need to focus on health because health drives a nation. We had a strike last year. They had an agreement, National Association of Resident Doctors. What happened to that agreement? Why are we going on strike again? And when you hear the NRRD members, when they speak, they say the government is not serious. That's what causes all of the palaver in the first place. Because you will sign an agreement with people, you wouldn't meet up with the agreement. There's another impending one coming with ASU. Discrepancies here and there. Until we'll have governments that meet agreements, that honors agreements, that honors its word, you will constantly have this. On the other side, I would like to appeal to the doctors. Yeah, to save lives. But really, when you look at the conditions at which these doctors work, have they done enough for them?
5,000 hazard allowance.
5,000 hazard allowance since the 1990s. Have they done a lot for them? And I always cite this scenario. As in 1983, the former Minister of Health, Professor Isaac Adewale, was in charge of resident doctors in University of Ibadan. They had a strike, same fighting the government. Many years after, he became Minister of Health. Things have not changed. Somebody would have thought that the young Isaac Adewale would have, fought head on when he was Minister of Health to ensure that things change. It's not changed. And things have not changed. On and on and on. The Minister of Labour is a medical doctor. You used to hear the things he says. No work, no pay. This was the same minister that said doctors are not leaving Nigeria when we know they are living in droves. Go to England. Okay. 3 out of 4 doctors are Nigerians, or 1 out of 4 are Nigerians. Who is deceiving who?
All right.
Well, these are the key issues at stake. Both the Minister of Labour and the Minister of Health are saying that the National Association of Resident Doctors should call off their strike. Mm-hmm. The Minister of Labour, Dr. Chris Ngige, even gave them a 1-week ultimatum, which expired on Monday. And he said after the expiration of that ultimatum, government will move against them by invoking Section 43 of the Labour Act. Now, what the Minister of Health is also referring to is on all fours with the position of the Minister of Labour. And he is quoting the International Labour Organization directive on no work, no pay rule. Yeah. And he's saying if you don't work, then we won't pay you. But the resident doctors, who constitute about a quarter of in fact, the majority, the largest majority of physicians in Nigeria, are saying they will not be intimidated and they will not call off the strike. So Nigeria is faced with a life and death situation. We have a third wave of COVID-19. We have cholera in 22 states. We have a certain virus that has also emerged and that is spreading. It's called the Marburg virus. In the face of all of this, you have the majority category of physicians in Nigeria putting down their tools and saying, if we do not address our demands, nothing will happen and we will not succumb to blackmail. Now, what is the issue? The issue, according to the Minister of Health, is that there are 12 demands and that the federal government has addressed 5 of those demands. 7 of those demands are state-related. But the president of the National Association of Resident Doctors, one guy called Iyulua, I think that's his name, he is saying that is not true, that hazard allowance has not been paid. The Minister of Labour says the money has been released. Well, the president of NERD says nobody has received anything. Compensation for families of persons who died in the front lines. Yes. Government says it has paid. The NERD says nobody has been paid. They have no such proof. And that it is not true that the federal government has met its own part of the bargain. I don't think that blackmail will work. Mm-hmm. I don't think that threat is a solution. The Minister of Health is appealing to the resident doctors to be patriotic. Mm-hmm. That after all, in some other countries, people volunteer to serve. Well, that's not what we're dealing with here. A laborer deserves his wages. Yes. This is the point that the NERD is making. And it will amount to blackmail to say that these doctors should work for free, that hazard allowance will not be paid, compensation for persons who died on the front line, and all the other demands will not be met just because they need to volunteer and work free for Nigeria. Agreements have been reached. This is the 3rd time the NERD is going on strike. This year alone, 8 months, they've gone on strike 3 times. Now, what is it that doctors government will not be allowed to talk to people. Even Minister Ngige was saying that he has told his children who are doctors not to join the strike. Well, I'm sure some of his children who are resident doctors are probably part of the strike. That's the irony of it.
Oh, yeah?
Well, it's a sad situation indeed. That's all on the news headlines. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Rotus Ojiri, Michael Wilson, Erin Akojola, and myself to give you updates on Africa, global business, COVID-19, and sporting activities. Stay with us.
All right, welcome back to the morning show right here, the Rise News channel. Our dependable Rotus Ojiri, it's time for you now. Rotus, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Adesua. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning to all our viewers. There's a really good article in this day newspaper on a report from energy consultants, global energy consultants, Wood Mackenzie. And what they've done is released an in-depth report on the value, in fact, the divestment of Shell Petroleum Development Company, or rather, Royal Dutch Shell, the divestment from their Nigerian subsidiary, Shell Development Petroleum Corporation. So they've essentially valued Shell Development Petroleum Corporation, the equity stake in the joint venture that they have with the NNPC, with Total, with any, let me get the math right. So 55% for the NNPC equity stake, 30% for Shell Petroleum Development Company, 10% for Total, I believe another 5% for ENI. So Shell SPDC's 30% equity stake has been valued at about $2.3 billion. And what they've said is that, look, across the board, there's about 4 billion barrels worth of oil across the entire joint venture. But only about 20% of that is commercially viable due to underinvestment and a whole number of other issues. So, I mean, we all, we talked yesterday about the $110 million settlement for the Ogoni people. We talked weeks ago about Shell wanting to divest from onshore and shallow water assets. You're looking at about 19 oil mining licenses that are up for sale. But they say, I think September the 10th is the deadline for Shell to get bids from them. But one of the key things that was pointed out in this report is that this is a joint venture, okay? So we're all in this together. You can't just sell off your assets without getting permission first and approval from NNPC. NNPC is basically their preemptive rights, their rights of first refusal. So the NNPC can buy those assets. But can they? You've already got $1.5 billion allocated to the Port Harcourt refinery. You've got another $1.4 billion to revamp the Warri and Kaduna refinery. You've got $2.7 billion, which you're taking dollars of an equity stake you're taking in the Dangote refinery. So it's doubtful that the NNPC has any finance room to be able to purchase those assets. So what's going to happen is, who can purchase the assets? SPDC is going to have to find a buyer and then come to Shell. And then come to the NNPC and say, hey, look, this is the buyer we have. Let's negotiate, your preemptive rights, and then hopefully they get an approval, and then you move forward. Who could buy them? As far as the indigenous players in the oil and gas space, Shell, of course, has been divesting over the last decade or more. You've got ITO, you've got Seplat, you've got all these other indigenous players in the oil and gas sector who have purchased assets over the number of years. But who has the room, the fiscal room, to take on this $2.3 billion worth of assets? A lot of these oil and gas companies are already heavily indebted. So they might look at other IOCs, other international oil companies, or they look at foreign independents. Foreign independents is a grade lower than the international IOCs. They're not as big as them. They might be able to take on these assets. So there's a lot in that report, but those are the key measures in that, $2.3 billion worth, and then they need to get that, negotiate those preemptive rights of first refusal from the NNPC before moving forward. Mele Kyari has said that, the NNPC is going to protect Nigeria's interests, but at the same time, they cannot stop Shell from the divestment. So this is going to take a while with respect to them, fully divesting from those onshore and shallow water. Again, Shell is still in deep water. We move to Unilever. Unilever PLC, makers of toothpaste, soap, and the likes, a conglomerate. They had an investor call where this really isn't news, but it's new information. But they were essentially just restating the fact that they've had FX issues with respect to access, and particularly that they purchased foreign exchange at about 9 to 10% higher than the INE rates, that is the investors and exporters window rate, which is about, it closed at 411 yesterday. They said that between January to June, half year of 2021, they spent about 440 to 450 naira per dollar. It's impacting their bottom line. They need to import petrochemicals in order to process a lot of their products. What Unilever has said, in fact, it was, who was quoted here? It was Adeshola Sotande Peters, who is the finance director at Unilever PLC. The finance director was the one quoted as saying that, they've now had to look at sourcing for more raw materials in order to reduce their import bill for foreign exchange. So they're also saying that, look, they're going to wait and see how the banks perform in terms of providing FX to end users since the BDCs have been kicked out. Still on for FX, the Bankers Committee had a meeting yesterday, and the Bankers Committee here in Nigeria said that they will sanction customers, bank customers, and put a PND on their account, a post-no debit, which is a restriction, if they are found to be involved in fraudulent FX transactions. So the CBN has been talking about making sure that there's a reduction in these infractions, and the banks are saying that, look, now it's not just going after in the past, BDCs or the banks themselves. That's on the CBN's point. The bank is now saying that they will actually go after customers that are involved. So anyone out there who is planning on doing this, you've been put on notice. Zainab Ahmed, Finance Minister of Nigeria, says that 1.8 trillion naira worth of used vehicles was imported into Nigeria between October 2018 and September 2019. What she said is that about half of that money Nigeria didn't realize about half of that value, because about half of those vehicles that come into the country are smuggled. And so she was speaking at the National Vehicle Registry, or she was speaking at a seminar in Abuja about a National Vehicle Registry policy, which is meant to be able to track vehicles that come in so they can realize customs duties from those vehicles. So basically, it's another smuggling issue that we've seen with the borders, with food, rice, and so on and so forth. Finally, sports. Lionel Messi is going to be boosting tourism for Rwanda. Rwanda has a Visit Rwanda campaign. They have a deal with PSG, an existing deal that was there before Messi came aboard. You should see the President Kagame, who is posing with a Visit Rwanda sign there. And basically, it's just to boost tourism into Rwanda. So apparently, I mean, you can see Messi already wearing a Visit Rwanda t-shirt. They were fast. The moment the deal was announced, since there's already a deal with Rwanda and PSG, they got Messi to wear that shirt. Can you imagine Messi wearing a Visit Nigeria t-shirt or any country? I can imagine. He's a brand ambassador now. It's huge. Rwanda brought in finally about $498 million in tourism revenue in 2019. It was struck down in 2020, but this is going to be a major boost for Rwanda. I mean, I can just imagine Rotus, and that's the star power Messi brings to everything, and that's what we should do. When we sell Nigeria, we should have, Visit Nigeria, and also put things in place that make the visit worth the while of the people coming when they visit Nigeria, because this country is beautiful. From the Mambila plateaus to every area, but we should fix security, fix infrastructure, fix the well-being of people so that Nigerians can truly show the true hospitality, they represent when people come to the country. But real quickly, Rotus, I mean, all the stories you've taken today, just a sum total of them, shows the problems we face. Companies, difficulty to get Forex and the likes, a lot of things happening. They cannot, effectively function when it's difficult for them to get Forex. And those are the challenges we face in the country. And that's why, to a large extent, we must do something about our foreign exchange market. We must do the quick work of harmonization. And apart from that, for us to be able to get Forex, we must produce. We must produce. There are a lot of products we can churn out here locally. We must increase local content, to be able to get Forex in our economy and get this Forex out to companies and the likes, so that we are not constantly hedging the Naira. We're not hedging the currency almost every single time. But great one there, for Lionel Messi and for Rwanda. I just look forward to that day when Nigeria can do at least 1 billion in foreign exchange from tourism. And concerning vehicle registration, I thought they said they shut the borders, Rotus. I thought they said the borders were not effective. So how were those cars smuggled in? And how is it that we didn't get the proper custom clearance on those cars that came in?
Well, I think it's as follows. With regard to Rwanda, the country, the land of 1,000 appeals, the emerging Singapore of Africa. I think the whole point is about leadership. I mean, I'm not a big fan of President Paul Kagame. I'd criticize him for, being a benevolent dictator in Africa. But in terms of what he's been able to achieve in turning around that country from the ruins of genocide and civil war to a forward-looking country, I think he's done very well in that regard. And that's why, most commentators will say, well, he may have his bad side, but he's been able to move this country forward. Now, and Rwanda, he has succeeded in branding that country, providing a proposition that appeals to the international community. The Rwanda Development Board has a relationship, a partnership with the PSG, and now with the star power of, Lionel Messi. I think I saw Mbappe also wearing that jersey. Maybe some other superstars in PSG would help to, sell Rwanda. Imagine how that will help the tourism industry in, Rwanda. Yes, it may be something of a police state, more or less, but in terms of housing, in terms of manufacturing, in terms of even documenting history, Rwanda has been able to do very well under Paul Kagame. And this is one example. And perhaps is there something that we can learn from this to see how getting the right leader can give the country the necessary momentum. That's one. Two, the Minister of Finance is talking about a vehicle registry office. We're told 1.8 trillion worth of vehicles, used vehicles, were imported into Nigeria between 2018 and 2019. We don't have the statistics yet for the period between 2019 and 2021. Maybe, the figures will even be more than that. And now we're talking about a vehicle registry office, a national database. I think it's a scandal that we don't have a national database for vehicles in Nigeria. And it's a demonstration of shamelessness, that the Minister of Finance will come forward to make that public. What has been the job of all the vehicle registration offices in the various states? What has been the job of the Federal Road Safety Commission? What has been the job of the customs? It's only now, in 2021, that we're going to introduce a pilot phase of it at the Kirikiri Light Terminal. Well, we don't seem to have a tradition of proper documentation in this country. I would have loved to hear more from the Minister of Finance of Nigeria. What is being done, not to be tracking used vehicles all over the place, but what is being done to encourage local manufacturing of vehicles in Nigeria and encouraging multinationals to come and set up factories here. One of the things the Ministry of Finance wants to do now is to register vehicles so that they can track kidnapping, so that they can prevent crime. Is the Ministry of Finance also going to dabble into police work? This is the question that we would like to ask. And then one more point before we run out of time. It has to do with the point you raised about abuse of Forex. The Bankers Committee, when it rose from its meeting yesterday, was saying that people applying to buy foreign exchange will be reported to the police if they engage in sharp practices, if they provide false information. No, the Bankers Committee should start from its own house. The charity in this regard, in terms of making sure that the Forex regime is in order, should start with the banks themselves. Because there is no customer that can go and grab the invisibles. That's Forex for school fees, for medical issues and all that. They are called invisibles. Without collusion from within the bank. The Bankers Committee should start by putting structures in place, mechanisms in place to ensure that there is honesty, there is integrity, there is transparency. Now that the Central Bank of Nigeria has moved from the Bureau de Change, the BDCs, to the banks as retailers of Forex. That I didn't see in their statement. It's not enough to just blame the customer.
All right, thank you so much, Rotus. Really appreciate you. Moving on to business update. Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Michael, good morning.
Yeah, morning. Let's take a look overview at what's going on in the world. And really, it's about the mixed employment and inflation news we got from the United States yesterday. It stopped a huge breakout in the Dow. All the equities in record territory there, but only just. The markets appear to be working on this kind of baseline assumption that the tapering of quantitative easing is to take place, but they haven't actually really addressed the dreadful problem and the more sensitive problem of rate rises. One story that everybody should be monitoring this morning is the continued closure of Chinese ports because of COVID-19. It's a developing story. One I understand has closed completely. They are looking at other ones as well. This is not going to help supply chains, so we'll expect more of that story over the weekend, but it's something to follow very, very closely. As far as stocks are concerned, South Korean stocks down. Samsung Air released from prison. We've been through that story on Friday, so that brought Samsung down. And the broader base Kospi in South Korea down about 1.25%, same down about 0.25% as far as China's concerned, and it's Australia really the only bright spot, but only up about 0.5%. So China's new envoy has been talking to the United States, and during that they exchanged the usual platitudes about more trade and the rest of it, but most importantly China stressed that it still regards Taiwan as its own and will regard any kind of change in that policy as being a complete red line for Beijing. As far as the United States is concerned, I said to you that in record territory, stock futures relatively flat right now. Shares of Disney up 4%. I'll come on to that because that's worth a secondly look at. And weekly jobless claims came in at 375,000. Again, precisely as predicted. But and this is a big but, I think the producer price index, which measures, it excludes foods, but it measures the kind of material costs and labor costs that American companies have to pay, rose 0.9 instead of 0.5% as expected. So that's an important inflationary pressure in the United States, yet another one. Disney then beats expectations right across the board. Basically, people actually going back to its theme parks. But very importantly, Disney is going to experiment and continue to experiment with viewership habits and how people will actually move from being in the middle of the pandemic to maybe going to the cinema or maybe not, and how long will the theatrical release of movies be before it goes onto its streaming service? That is a question which is open. They're actually looking at that right now. Bill Gates, the co-founder of Microsoft, said his climate investment fund will give $1.5 billion, but it'll match it to what the US government's going to spend. It's not just standalone. This is matching to what's being discussed there. $1 trillion infrastructure bill, as you know, passed by the Senate this week, still has to go through the House of Representatives. But that breakthrough energy fund of Bill Gates could spend the money, again, matched money, not standalone money, over the next 3 years or so. Airbnb second quarter revenue nearly quadrupled the lows of the pandemic, but the share price is down about 3% because the company issued a warning about the autumnals, the Americans call it the fall, about whether or not that's going to be the same sort of level of revenues of people staying at the properties. They think not, but it's cautioned, and that caused it to fall. Let's talk about the UK and Ireland. The trade has fallen about 29% after Brexit because of customs complications and so on. Ireland is hopping over the UK directly into Europe with its exports at the expense of British ports on the west coast. As far as extreme weather's concerned, Lloyd's of London, but this is a global thing, wildfires, US winter storms, tornadoes, yes, in Europe. $40 billion blow to global insurance. Swiss Re, for one, is blaming all this on climate change and rapid urban development. On the positive side of things, Amazon is going to put its next Lord of the Rings movie. Is going to produce it actually in the UK. It's as yet untitled, but it's set thousands of years, apparently, before the events in J.R.R. Tolkien's books and so on. In the UK, Amazon Studios spent $465 million on the first series, it could be even more. That's good for the UK film industry and production industry, which is world-class and world-leading as we speak. I won't bore you with the current price of oil, but I will give you what they are predicting, and it's caught between politics and demand, as you'd expect. Number one, Iran and the continuing tensions with that could be stoking up supply disruption. The Delta variant, though, may cut down on demand. The three of the world's largest oil consumers, US, China, and India, are noticing a rebound in the number of Delta infections. And China continues to do that. Again, that story I'm talking about, you will be monitoring this. We all will over the weekend about their docks, various ports closing there. And gold really changing, not a lot really. Again, nothing inflationary for gold bugs to get their teeth into, sort of in a $20 range as we speak. That's the global view.
Right, Michael, real quickly, I want to talk about China. China now is trying to formulate a policy to clamp down on tech companies. And that's what the Central Party in China is saying they want to do. I mean, how is that going to, what effect is that going to have on the tech ecosystem in China? For instance, SoftBank and Masayoshi Son have said that they will not be doing any more investment in Chinese companies and the likes. They want to hold things up for a minute and look at the regulatory environment in China. What is happening? Will this kill the likes, further future innovation, the likes of ByteDance and other companies and TikTok and all the other companies? Will this just shrink China as that technological powerhouse? Is this state capitalism destroying itself? It's sort of like a Schumpeterian gale now?
No, it's neither of those things. What's happening is that China is going to clamp down on all sorts of industries. It's not just tech. They said this yesterday. We were talking about this yesterday. And I said to you that what they're actually doing is they're actually trying to form an economy now which is for the common good rather than for enriching people who are in the private sector. That's what's happening in China right now. Now, again, you've got investors actually, again, yesterday we were talking about this, about investors actually trying to adjust their China portfolios because they're getting no guidance about what the government policy actually is and which particular sectors they're going to clamp down tomorrow, next week, next year. Who knows? So basically, everything that's going on there is clouding investors' view about whether China is a good place to invest or not, because you have to be able to calculate risk in order to invest properly. That is what's being thrown up at the moment. My long-term view about it, if you want it, is that I feel that this is, again, a lot of megaphone diplomacy. I get what the Chinese are doing, but they are going to have to modify their behavior if they're going to join in with the kind of capitalist system that we are existing in right now. If not, then the world will change quite dramatically. I can't see that happening for a long time.
Well, two things. First, China, then South Korea. Now, in the case of China, they said their biggest port in that axis has been shut down when one worker came down with the Delta variant. What is likely to be the impact of that on the global supply chain? Is it likely to, cause a lot of disruption? Will it have an effect on the cost of shipping from that axis? And then in South Korea, the vice chairman of Samsung has been released. First, in 2017, he was sentenced to 7 years imprisonment for involvement with the then President Park Geun-hye. And then that was reduced to 2.5 years. He served only about 8 months, and now he's been released in national interest. We're told that Samsung has not been able to get ahead of the battle over advanced chips, semiconductors, and all of that. And now in national interest, he has been released so that he can sign off on certain important things. So is it that in South Korea, the bigger you are, the richer you are, the more important you are within a chaebol, it doesn't matter what crime you commit? Would they also release President Park, or she is not important enough in the national interest? And this is Moon Jae-in, President Moon Jae-in, who came to power and said he was going to fight the chaebols. Is this about the elections next year?
Well, I don't know the insides of South Korean politics. Nobody is above the law, but it looks like what's happening in South Korea is such is the relationship between Samsung, which is the world's largest smartphone producer, is such that this chap has not been thinking about nothing when he's been in jail. He's been thinking about where he's going to take Samsung, and he knows that he will be, I would guess, have been in talks with government officials, and they're saying, right, it's time this chap actually came out. They masked it in this kind of celebration of the end of a war a long, long time ago. The fact of the matter is, precisely as you say, he's coming out because he can work better for Samsung out than he can actually in jail. And what investors will be looking at is how Samsung will be wresting control of microprocessors, artificial intelligence, and also developments in 5G, which is where they're placed at the moment in the future. So that's what all that's about. I know there's a lot of language going on and a lot of political camouflage, but at the bottom line, it's about money. Usually in these stories, good doctor, follow the money. As far as China's ports are concerned, yes, of course it will affect supply chains. It shows that I think it's very much about the horse having been, the stable door having been bolted after the horse has done. I was reporting a couple of days ago that there are nearly 400 ships sitting out, big, huge container ships sitting outside various ports all the way around the world, waiting for access. There are ports all the way around the world, not so much suffering from COVID, but suffering from infrastructure failure as well. I think this is a most important story to be following over the weekend, because the Chinese, if anything happens, they just shut it down. And that's certainly going to affect freight rates, going to affect inflation, and it's going to affect supply chains as well. In which order, I do not know. But it's a major story.
Anyway.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Anyway, isn't that the way of the Chinese? All right. So moving on, Adesowa, great to have you as always. Let's talk COVID-19.
Yes, thank you. Well, the global number for COVID-19 has surpassed 205 million cases and over 4.3 million deaths globally as well. But when we look at the vaccine doses administered globally at the moment, according to the Johns Hopkins University, there are also above 4.5 billion doses. China, of course, leads that pack. We have the US and India following to make up the top three. They have vaccinated the most numbers. They have administered the most numbers. But keep in mind, like I always say, most of the vaccines available do require 2 shots to give you full immunity or to be fully vaccinated. In Nigeria here, in the last 24 hours, the country recorded 5 COVID-related deaths and 753 cases, just slightly lower than the 6 months daily high of 790 cases reported a day earlier. Again, Lagos has posted the most cases for the day. In a moment, I'll tell you about the latest efforts by the Lagos State government to mitigate the effect of a third wave of the COVID-19 infections. But before then, it's official. Nigeria has taken delivery of 177,600 doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccines. The first tranche of the 29,850,000 doses that the federal government procured through the African Vaccine Acquisition Team of the African Union Commission through the facility provided by the Afrexim Bank. And for the first time, we have been told how much the vaccines cost the government. According to the NPHCDA Executive Director, the 29 million doses cost over 122 billion naira, and that's about $298.5 million. But let's listen to how the vaccines will be deployed.
Because it is a one-dose effective vaccine, these doses will be focused on those who are in the hard-to-reach areas. That is to say, the riverine areas, desert communities, security-compromised areas, and also the elderly. This is because these are the people who may find it difficult to leave their homes to the health facility for the second dose after taking a first one.
And to Lagos, as I said earlier, as the state records a surge in coronavirus cases, the state government has announced it has fully activated 10 COVID oxygen treatment and sample collection centers as well as 20 local government area-based COVID sample collection sites. Now, the Health Commissioner for Lagos State explains that the 10 COVID oxygen treatment and sample collection centers were established as dual-purpose facilities and strategically located in 10 local government areas with a high burden of COVID-19 infection to provide, of course, oxygen support and serve as COVID sample collection base to residents. Now, the high burden local governments include, of course, we have Etiosa, Surulere, Koshofe. If we can have the slide, Amuodofin, Akpakpa, Isolo, amongst others. So this is where you're having the high burden of infections coming from at the moment in Lagos State. These local government areas where the government has now activated those dual-purpose oxygen treatment centers and sample collection centers away from Lagos and away from Nigeria. In the U.S., the FDA has cleared Pfizer and Moderna vaccines as booster jabs for some people with weakened immune systems. The change in FDA regulations is specific to patients who have been unable to mount adequate immune response against the virus even after being fully vaccinated. And those eligible include people who have had organ transplants and some cancer patients. An estimated 2.7% of the adult population in America are immune compromised.
All right. So, congratulations to the, is it NCDC or the Primary Healthcare Board on the purchase of this?
MPHCDA.
MPHCDA.
Yeah.
175 million out of 40 million coming in. That's
177,600
out of
29
million coming in. 29 plus 4 plus another, if we want to add the Chinese ones that came in, 400,000.
That were promised.
Yeah, so let's say everything just 35, 40 million. The population of Nigeria is over 200 million. We still have a long way to go.
Indeed.
And congratulations, but no congratulations. And except we go through that long way and get at least 70% of the population double vaccination. Double vaccination. And in the case of Johnson & Johnson, single vaccination, we have not started yet. Because we are seeing in places where they have covered a lot of ground. Population of America over 300 million. They've done 167 or 168 million jabs. They are inching towards, that herd immunity. But the southern states that have been very, I don't know the word to use now, uninterested in this vaccination move are suffering for it now. And because of that, no mask mandate in places like Florida, cases are increasing. So we should be careful.
Okay.
And except we do that. And secondly, real quickly, I wanted to talk about monococcal cocktails, but Dr. Mati, take it away because of time.
Okay. First, Nigeria. Dr. Shaib was making the point that the vaccination, the rollout of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine will start on Monday.
Yes.
Have they gone through the process of verification and endorsement by NAFDAC? Let this not be the same case we had with Moderna, the vaccines from the United States, and we were told it would start on so day, and then it was postponed. So I hope Dr. Shaib did not make that announcement too early. Secondly, the objective of the Nigerian government is to achieve 40% immunization rate by the end of this year and 70% by next year. And we hope that, with what they have now, they will be able to work apace. Now, 212 billion, right?
Yes.
Yes, has been spent, 122 billion.
122 billion naira.
122 billion naira
Yes.
has been spent now through a facility from Afrixim to procure 29 million doses.
Yes.
We hope also that they will get the delivery in place very quickly. With the training of workers, we hope also that the rollout will be seamless. Now, he says the J&J will be made available to the frail, the elderly, hard-to-reach areas of Nigeria. I hope he will stick to that. But there will probably be many Nigerians in urban areas who will also prefer the single-dose Johnson & Johnson dose, shot, because it's easier. You just take it once
and you
relax. As for the United States, where you talked about the plans by the CDC and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to take a second look at booster vaccines. And in this case, Dr. Fauci is saying that it will be for the vulnerable, the most vulnerable, the immunosuppressed persons. where applicable, and that the U.S. has enough vaccines. Well, this debate has been on since May, with the U.S. saying the data is not enough. But Pfizer has been insisting that there is enough data now based on their research in Israel, and a scientific paper has been submitted for peer review. And it's on the basis of that Pfizer is pushing for booster doses within 6 months or at most within a year. But WHO says no. That in the light of the need for equity and solidarity, developed countries that have excess vaccines cannot begin to talk about their people getting a booster dose, whereas low and middle income countries, underprivileged countries do not have enough vaccines. And, WHO, in fact, is opposed to the idea of a third dose for persons. But across the world, there's been this debate about how, a booster vaccine, a third dose of either Pfizer or Moderna or any other vaccine can increase immunity. I think that the moral point that is being made by Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, by the chief scientist of WHO, that some people cannot be giving themselves dessert when some other people have not even had a bite of an appetizer. Yes. Do you get what I'm saying?
I do.
So I think that we should focus on global solidarity, global equity. There is a moral burden. Yeah. Other countries saying we have more than enough, taking boosters, when some people in other parts of the world have not even had a single dose. Yeah. I support the position of the WHO Health Organization in this regard.
Indeed, in equity.